So you see what I'm doing here? I'm going to present my philosophy, but I do it with this unsympathetic filter. To a conventional thinker, all these flames, of course, have all kinds of hideous symbolism, which I think is superficial. But so yeah, so with skepticism versus dogmatism, I don't say everybody should become a skeptic. I don't know that that would be better for the world if everybody became a skeptic. I do think that skepticism adheres better to truth than the alternatives, but I can't say that even though I have faith and in the long run the truth ultimately works out better than fantasies, just by definition that we're trying to survive in the real world. We have short lives. I don't know that in the long run it's going to pay off for you. Um, I do believe that the truth is good to pursue no matter what, even if it seems like it's making things worse for a while. But whatever, I don't rely on that except for in my own case. I advocate that I use skepticism. And I talk about why skepticism has worked out better for me than the dogmatic approaches to knowledge. And I think really one of the main things is that in skepticism, you pay attention to your mistakes because it's about a learning process. I'll tell you what I mean. Um, I was thinking recently about an old mistake I had made because I remember old mistakes and they come to me again, and I remember. And this was one when I was fairly young, and not mistakes, but times I was confused and I figured out the confusion. So not really a mistake, but confused by something that now is not confusing at all. The mistake was to be confused by it, sort of a mistake now in my perspective now. But really, I'd rather not use the word mistake and just talk about the fact that I was confused. And I remember not only that I was confused and that I had it wrong, but also the feeling that I had when it made sense. Um, when it made sense that it was some sort of an enigma, when in reality it has straightforward explanations. So the alleged enigma at the time just took me a couple hours to figure out if I recall correctly. It was a long time ago though. Was this? It was about progeneration. We all have two direct ancestors, our parents, and they each have two, and it's a mathematical necessity. So going back in time, of course, grandparent to great grandparent to great great grandparent and so forth, you have more ancestors the further back you go. There's a cone of more ancestors leading to you. Now, also, when your progeny, uh, well, you could have 0 or 1 children, but we know the population's growing, so we know that people are having on average, more than 1 child. So we have it going out in the future as well. So both into the past, you have an expanding number of ancestors, and in the future, you have an increasing number of descendants. And I was really struck by a sense of wonder that you're this sort of focal between these two cones. But I also was realizing, wait, if you're going bigger and bigger into the past, you're going to run out of people because there's lesser and lesser people into the past. Okay, so I figured that out. I assume you can easily figure out why that happens. It's very interesting stuff about tree culling and how counterintuitive it can be at one scale and obvious at another scale. But the thing is, a dogmatic type thinker has no reason to remember that confusion. I remember actually what it felt like, in the sense of wonder of thinking, what, huh? How is it impossible as possible? And sorting it out, and I was left still with the sense of wonder of how amazing it is that we as individual human beings are this connection, the unitary connection between multiple humans in the past and multiple in the future, and we're a nexus. Each individual a living nexus in a network of living humans. I think that's cool. I still have a sense of wonder about that. But in terms of the mathematical idea, of course, I'm not confused and it was an error. Well, the dogmatic way of judging whether something is worth knowing is basically if it's correct or not. So once you realize that's incorrect, you just remember the new version. But see, I like to remember these confusing things and even confuse myself again, even now when I'm very clear and it doesn't confuse me, because I get in the habit of how it is to hop out of that thing. And I know I'm still confused now about things I'll have figured out by the future, hopefully. So I'm looking for the patterns of my past confusion to give me hints as to what kind of confusion I might be under right now. And so skepticism is therefore the memorization of a learning process. where it's important the path that you're taking, because we don't have this dogmatic idea of something is either correct or not or incorrect. To us, there's a relative amount of correctness, and it's always relative to some set of facts. If you want to know which idea, let's say you have a body of thought T and body of thought uh, T1, T naught and T1. Which one is more correct? Well, you take all the facts that they take as inputs. You take all the predictions they make as outputs. You compare those outputs to observed facts in reality, and whatever the correlation is, however much of a correlation there is, that's the percentage of truth, for example. So we want to remember our past mistakes, because we're not wrong or right. Everything is wrong and right. We call things right when the correctness is more than the incorrectness. We call them wrong when the incorrectness is more than the correctness. But in all cases, it's actually a mixture. And so, as a skeptic, I remember my past mistakes. Why? Because in them are various things. First of all, there's still elements of wonder. You solve the problem, but there's still an element of wonder. Even though when we go back in our lineage, we get cold because of all our common ancestors, the tree gets cold, and we actually have a reducing population, even though mathematically the ancestors fan out. In other words, you start to have the same ancestor appearing in multiple parts of the fan, and so the fan collapses. Even though that mathematically is explained, there's still a sense of wonder in the fact that, yes, you are a nexus between multiple ancestors and multiple descendants. It's kind of cool, all the individuals, like a cone, we're a point. So there's elements that are still worthwhile, but mostly it's that if you confuse yourself again about something, and walk out of that confusion, you become comfortable with confusion. Confusion is a dangerous, scary thing for a lot of people. People tend toward panic if they are confused and feel threatened at the same time. But if you can become calm and not feel threatened, for example, by reconfusing yourself so confusion alone doesn't cause panic, doesn't make you feel threatened, and you can feel comfortable, then confusion is a wonderful thing, because, first of all new knowledge comes from being confused. You have to have had an idea. Then you become somewhat disillusioned with the idea. Then you're confused because you don't have another idea to replace it, and then you create another idea to replace it. And so always through confusion. So I embrace confusion in that sense. Yes, the point of confusion is to sort it out and get rid of the confusion, but that's a wonderful process. Looking at something that's blurry and sorting it out until it resolves into distinct shapes, that's just wonderful. That's why I like to do philosophy. The other thing I want to talk about is that I'm not primarily a skeptic. I'm not convinced of skepticism and draw everything from that. I'm a natural philosopher. I use skepticism because it goes with natural philosophy perfectly. Now, a natural philosopher is somebody that takes the truth from nature. We think that all truth is from nature. So if you have a theory and you want to know if it's true, and we're talking about comparing to facts, the facts come from nature. You have to compare to nature. If you have a theory that can't be compared to nature, then it's just poetry. It's not really a theory, according to a natural philosopher. It makes no statements about nature, and therefore it really, in a sense, makes no statements. Now, incidentally, you're making a statement, the air vibrations are in nature, you are embedded in nature. So while it seems to make no statements about nature, it does. For example, that nature could come up with something pointless, say. But if we want to forget that threshold and call that, theories that cannot be put into practice, that's not good enough. Now, it's okay for theories like string theory, which we haven't figured out any practice or way to test them yet, but the idea is that they are material, and in principle, they could be tested or applied, right? That's okay. I'm not saying we need applied science. I like theoretical science. But theoretical science has to be involved with the material world, manipulating the material world. And so it's natural philosophy that drives me. I want to put everything up to what nature says. And if nature says nothing about that topic, then I don't think it is a topic. So, all right. Cheers. Man, it's hot.